Well, welcome to Backstage with Geoffrey Morrissey. I'm your host, Geoffrey Morrissey. We're here at the Sinclair, and I'm joined by Graham from Tokyo Police Club. Graham, how are you?
I'm great. We're backstage.
We're backstage, true to the name.
We kind of had
nice.
a false start on this interview. I was like, let's go to this loud restaurant with no plugs and nowhere to do anything. And then it was very apparent immediately it wasn't going to be suitable. And if you'd been like, we're backstage, I would have been like, well, why didn't I know that? We could have gone backstage.
Exactly. Well, thank you for helping us out, but the false start did lead to something good. You were able to pick from, I feel like I'm recording an ad, a great beer menu here at the Sinclair.
Oh, my God, yes.
So what did you go with, and what's your usual go-to?
This is a Notch Session Pilsner.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't got a usual go-to so much these days. I mean, whatever's on the rider. Listeners at home should note that our tour manager just walked in and then did the most conspicuous walk out of the dressing room humanly possible.
He's back. You can come in.
Oh, he's got meal vouchers.
Yeah.
So that's actually apropos because I was going to say that my usual go-to on tour is whatever we get for free on the tour. So getting to go out to the bar and actually select something from a menu is an embarrassment of riches for me.
Nice. Well, that's what we like to hear. And this is your first day of tour.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any rituals on the first night?
Try to remember the songs. We especially now, we've been off for like 4 months. Mm-hmm. And we haven't even really been we haven't practiced or really all four of us been in the same place until yesterday when we packed the van and drove. So I feel more than usually trepidatious about knowing how to play everything. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, I know that my fingers know how to play the songs, so my job is basically to just like stop thinking and let the muscle memory do its work.
Well, there you go. Well, Boston feels like a fitting city to kind of start this in. Because,
absolutely.
And maybe you could speak to this. I thought I heard a little bit of a Boston accent in Ready to Win, or at least the way that vocal was delivered.
Well, Dave was born in Ireland.
Really? Okay.
So I mean, only until he moved to Canada when he was 2 years old.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot of Irish heritage in Boston, so maybe the sort of suburban Ontario Irish former accent has some similarities to the Boston Irish former accent. I don't know.
Interesting, yeah, because, I mean, when you mention that, I have a lot of friends whose parents or they are directly off the boat Ireland still. Is there a large Irish population around where you grew up, or was Dave kind of the exception to the rule?
Yeah, more the exception. I mean, there's obviously, like, we grew up in a suburb of Toronto, so it is pretty heavily former English, Irish, German, like you name the kind of white person and we have it. But in terms of sort of like fresh immigrants from Ireland, I didn't meet many people with accents that weren't Dave's parents.
We'll have to see if any more folks from sort of the Emerald Isle make it out to the show tonight. TPC is the new album. I love it. Noticed, obviously, TPC, Tokyo Police Club, not quite self-titled. Would you guys have been opposed to a self-titled release?
No. Well, I do have... It bugs me when bands do self-titled releases, like, mid-career. Because it's just, I get why they do it, but the narrative is always the exact same, and you have to put up... I hate album narratives. I'm in the wrong line of work, I know. But you have to put up with the whole thing that's like, well, you know, we just felt like we finally made a statement that was exactly true to us. I'm like, okay, it's been done. Shut up. So, I mean, we didn't talk about it in those terms, and we never talked about calling it Tokyo Police Club. That never came up. But TPC was kind of like the first idea that anyone pitched. It was Dave's idea for the album title. And then the way that we usually work creatively is that something will come up early on that will feel sticky, but then we'll go through a million more ideas and then eventually come back around to sort of the earlier idea. Force Field was the exact same thing. Like, that was kind of the first idea for a title. And then over 3 years, we entertained a million other notions before realizing, like, maybe our first impulse actually had something to it.
One of the things that you mentioned in there, you don't like album narratives. You're in the wrong line of work. I feel like that's my job, to read too much into everything as a music journalist to create that narrative.
I mean, it's kind of the dance that we all must do, where, like, you know, we have to send out a press release. Yeah. And, I mean, there's a lot of people writing about music. There's a ton of music right now. I don't want to sound like I'm being disparaging towards music journalists as a demographic, but not everyone is as thoughtful and as well researched as everyone. And so you kind of need to give people something. The people that are going to just kind of ask, they're going to take your press release and then form it into a series of questions, which is really common. And, you know, people don't get paid that well, so fair enough. but you got to give them at least something that you know is going to say what you want to say.
Yeah.
And for better or for worse, that means deciding on a narrative. And that's tough because the truth is there aren't that many interesting narratives, you know? Mm-hmm. Every once in a while, a band does something that's like truly different or truly weird or truly interesting. But for the most part, it's a lot of professional musicians trying their best to write good songs. And that seems like it should be enough for me, but, you know, it's not very hooky. It's not very sticky. And, like, 4 white Canadians making their 6th album and trying their best is not, you know, the world's most compelling story. But it is the only real story, so then you have to try and find a way to dress that up and make people, you know, remember it.
Well, I mean, I would argue it's a compelling story when the album is as strong as yours is. Like,
well,
you know, the songs on it
If it were up to me, I think the press release would just be like, this album's really good.
Yeah, exactly.
The band made a good album. So there's, in Canada, do you know Alexis on Fire?
Yeah, City in Color, Dallas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Alexis on Fire, who have sort of been mostly broken up aside for a few reunion shows, just put out a new single. They like got back together and we wrote a new song, we put it out. And then there's another band from Toronto called Colorado, who are really good friends of ours. And Colorado is putting out a new record, and they just announced, like, this is our last record, our last tour. We're calling it quits after this. And so we got an email. We got, like, a weekly email from the guy that liaises with the radio stations on our behalf. And he was like, hey, guys, like, you know, only 2 new songs got heavily added this week, and it was the Alexis on Fire reunion single and the Colorado Going Away single. I was like, there's no reward for having stick-to-itiveness in this business, you know? You break up, people are excited. You get back together, people are excited. But you just keep trucking, nobody gives a shit.
And that's very unfortunate because people should give a shit about this record. I promise we'll talk about it in detail, but this is really sort of an interesting thing, at least for me, a road to go down. And you sort of mentioned that when people break up, people give a shit. One of the things with this and the album narrative, for lack of better words, is this could have been the last album, or there was talk that it wouldn't happen.
Which is true. That's not a lie.
Yeah, exactly. And oh dear God, sort of. And then there's one track on there, One of These Days, which fascinates me because it's all about legacy and how you'll be remembered in a sense. So I don't know. Those are 2 really interesting simultaneous thoughts. It could have been the last album, and it's not. And then having a song about legacy there too. Yeah. So are you guys at a point where you're thinking at all about legacy of the band or how you want to be remembered? Or
no. I genuinely, and I don't say that to be falsely modest or anything, because I do think a lot about how the band is consumed, and I do think in that sort of metatextual sense about, like, what is the narrative, or what is the story, or what are people taking away from it, especially when we've been going this long and, you know, it's all the novelty has worn off.
Yeah.
So that's of interest to me, that what we're in and how people interpret that. But the idea of a legacy, I mean, so few bands get to have a legacy, honestly. Like, you know, what bands do we still remember? You know, when I was, before we just started, when we were being influenced by, you know, the bands of the early aughts, your Strokes, your Interpols, your Broken Social Scenes, Arcade Fires, so on and so forth. Already a ton of bands that were around then that seemed to loom so large barely have any, you know, any legacy. And then I grew up in the 90s listening, you know, watching those music videos and all those bands. Even more of those bands have been forgotten. Then bands from the 80s have been, you know, and the further along you go, the less bands get to be, you know, like, how many classical composers can someone name?
Yeah.
Because there was many of them, and now you could probably get someone to name a dozen that span the course of like 300 years of music. So I'm not so foolish as to think that Tokyo Police Club is going to be one of the 12 bands that's remembered from this time, and I'm fine with that. I don't think it needs. That's too much, I think, to think about.
Yeah.
To try and zoom out that far from where you're at and conceive of a legacy or conceive of any lasting anything. I mean, if one of our songs has any purchase 30 years from now, that's insanely cool. I'll take that.
Well, and true, and you'll have a legacy, obviously, to the fans that you have, and some people are like, that band, that was my band.
We have a legacy now, in a way, right? Because we've been around for... A, we've been around for 13 years, and B, we were part of a little, not a scene, but a little bubble, this like MySpacey indie rock, garage rock thing that happened in 05, 06, 07 that we were very fortunate to catch sort of the tail of that really gave us our career, to be honest.
Yeah.
That now is cause for nostalgia. And it's interesting for us because we're still making records, and as you say, TPC is a very good record, and I agree with you, if I can say that without sounding entirely arrogant. In many ways, it's our best work, or at least I think it stands up next to anything else in our catalog. But next year is the 10th anniversary of Champ, and we're also thinking about like, okay, how do we exploit that, and how do we exploit like we toured with Matt and Kim.
Oh, nice.
This time last year, and people were coming out being like, oh man, haven't seen Tokyo Police Club Matt and Kim since 2007. So cool to see them again in 2018. And in one sense, you feel incredibly old and incredibly like washed. But in another sense, that's incredible.
It is.
You know, these are people that are now in their 30s and their 40s. They have kids. They hired a sitter. They came out and they remember the old days. So, you know, that is kind of baked into it as well, which is a whole other kettle of fish.
Yeah. And I think you and I share one of those bands, too, of sort of that early aughts, 90s era of, one, love this band, two, why doesn't everyone know their name? The Hold Steady.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like my favorite band.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, the Hold Steady have done pretty well for themselves. And they have, you know, I'm obviously not privy to, like, their bank accounts, so maybe I'm overestimating how they're doing. But from outside, it seems like they have the perfect career right now. They're like, they don't even tour. They just go to one city and play 4 shows. They release a song or 2 around their shows. Like, so they did a 4-night stand in Toronto late last year, and I went to 2 of the nights. And it was just, it's a place called the Horseshoe Tavern, which is like Toronto's legendary old venue, 400 cap, give or take. And just packed the rafters with people losing their mind loving this band. And that's, I mean, that to me, if you can keep doing that, is, you know, amazing. That's more than I deserve, frankly.
Well, so interesting that you say that, too, because that's actually where I've never seen them before. Boys and Girls in America is one of my favorite albums.
Fucking A.
And I'll be able to see them when Frank Turner's doing something very similar where he's doing 4 nights in Boston, and they're playing one of the nights.
Oh, wow.
So I'll be able to...
Nice opening band.
A nice opening band.
Is he doing it here?
Yeah, he's doing it at the House of Blues.
Oh, man. Frank Turner's big, hey?
Huge.
I don't think I realized that. Well, we're pretty good friends with the Arkells guys.
Oh, yeah.
We've done a ton of touring with him and have sort of swapped in a really cool way where, like, in Canada, Arkells are like an arena band.
Yeah.
And they'll have Frank Turner out with them in Canada, but then he's so big in the States, so they'll swap. They'll come to the States. They'll support him. And they just played here a couple weeks ago.
They did, yeah.
And I think that's largely on the back of, like, doing, like, grinding out those Frank Turner tours and converting a bunch of fans.
And that's interesting, too, because that's how Frank got so big in Boston. Dropkick Murphys brought him out, like, in 2007, and then Boston became his American home. This goes too far into the lore, and we're veering too far off the track.
We are inside the baseball.
We're inside, yes, exactly. So we are going to go back to the album at hand.
I'm just gonna grab a Narragansett over here real quick.
Totally.
Foley on this. That's the beginning of Hercules.
A great tie-in and a nice little mid pick-me-up. This has been a cool interview because as soon as we said beer, the beer voucher came in. And then as soon as we stopped talking about Ireland, a bottle of Jameson made it into the room right at the end of it, too.
Yes, that's still on the rider.
It's still on the rider.
Those tend to pile up in the van. We're not going to polish that bottle off.
Yeah, oh God, no.
We're not the Hold Steady.
You're not the Hold Steady.
We do our best, but
there you go.
I have to be able to play the songs, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. That makes the show pretty good. One of the things that I loved, one of the songs I loved on this record was "Simple Dude," and I was reading that that's one that sort of stayed on the record because people had such a great reaction to it. So when you guys are sort of looking at folks for reactions from songs, what's either your favorite reaction that someone has, or one where you go, "They just did that. That's going to be something that we want to stick with."
Right. It really depends on who it is and how we're feeling that day, frankly, because we've done a lot of records in a lot of different contexts, and, you know, everything from super indie stuff, everything from like Saddle Creek, which is obviously they're a really artist-friendly, hands-off label, and then we were on Mom and Pop, who were a lot more interested in like having a say and having a seat at the table, and, you know, one of those is not better or worse than the other, and it's just been really interesting the different experiences we've had with people who are like, sure, send us the record when it's done and we'll put it out, versus people who are like, not only does this song need to be on the record, but it needs to be called this. And I need you to mix it thusly. And that's a really interesting experience to have, because these are often incredibly intelligent people who have done the work for a long time. And this record was probably somewhere in between the two. Our label now is called Dine Alone Records. It's City and Color, Alexis on Fire. They put all those guys out in Canada and here, I guess. And they were really just the best kind of label in that they were just enthusiastic, and they were never like, "Simple Dude has to be on the record." Like, we're not giving you the money. But they were like, We love Simple Dude feels special to us. And that kind of just goes in the memory banks. And, over the course of writing the record, which is 18 months, that stuff just it becomes something else that swirls around, and it goes in the memory banks with your reaction the first time you play the song, and the producer's reaction when you play it in the studio, and the crowd's reaction when you play it live. Although we did not road test the material on this record very much. So as your favorite reaction, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little perverse, and sometimes when a label person finds a song like baffling, I'm like, haha, good. Yeah. Which is probably not good practices, but sometimes you just feel a little bit like rebellious in that way. Mm-hmm. But honestly, just enthusiasm. Just anytime someone genuinely likes a song, you know what it is? If I play a song for someone, my friends will be over and be like, can I hear a new song? Can I hear a new song? Play them the demos or whatever we've got recorded. Mm-hmm. And if then then they'll say they say something nice about it because they can't not say something nice about it. But then you always know, like a few minutes later, if it's good, they'll whistle a bit of it. And be like, yes, okay, yeah. It got you. Like it went into your brain. You didn't, because of course, like I could have played them literally anything, and they would have been like, oh man, cool. Like you find something nice to compliment. But when it gets sticky, that means that there's actually something genuinely unconsciously worthwhile about the song.
And one of the things that I always find so interesting about songs from your perspective, the perspective of the band, is obviously you guys spend more time with them than anyone else.
Oh, yeah.
You write them, record them, play them live, and that's, I think, a longer and larger life cycle than most sort of casual fans realize. So,
sure.
Is there a point in sort of I'll use the phrase song life cycle where it's your favorite? Either is it the writing, is it now it's out, or is it playing live? Like, where do you find that you most connect with a song?
There's always a moment, if the song is worth a damn, it's not necessarily the first time you play it, but it's in the early stages of writing it or jamming it or putting it together, when you just all of a sudden something's happening.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to put into words more than that, but there's just a sense that, oh shit. Like you'll hear it on records even where they keep a little bit of studio banter, and sometimes you hear someone be like, that was the one.
Yep.
And you just there's something that happens. It's the magic. I mean, it's the really really amazing thing about what we get to do is that that supernatural thing that happens around the song, and that's the most rewarding, most incredible part. And then one of the tricky things about the work is that that's not the recording usually. That's the writing, and then you have to continue writing it, and you have to take that spark and take that magic and try and hone it in a way that everyone who listens to it is going to have the same experience. And that means that you have to go beyond that experience. And you because it's very tempting to take that moment of the spark and stop right there because it feels so good.
Yeah.
But what Rob Schnaff, who produced TBC and also produced Champ back in the day, when we were doing Champ with him, before we started recording, we went into a little rehearsal space, and he sat on the couch while we played the songs. It's called pre-production.
Yeah.
And at one point, we were up on the little stage, and we were all grinning our heads off at each other. And we were like, it happened. We felt the magic. And he was like, okay, I can tell that you guys are feeling something, but it's not coming past the monitors. And ever since then, I've always thought of it as our job is to take the thing that makes us feel so good and translate it across the monitors for the people that are going to listen to it.
Yeah.
And that, for better or for worse, involves a lot of sludging and a lot of takes and being in the studio and playing the guitar part 20 times in a row, which for me can feel like, God damn it, why did I do this to myself? But hopefully that gets it to a point where everyone starts to feel it. And then that's what's so great live, is that moment when you've done that, you've done the work, you've put in the hours, you've made the record, hopefully it's worked. And then that moment where you play it in the room and you feel it again and the crowd feels it again, and then that's the other most beautiful part of doing the songs.
Yeah, because it's the difference between taking it past the monitor and folks hearing it, taking it past the stage and folks seeing it and experiencing it with you.
Exactly.
That has to be such a great feeling. I wish I could write songs and sort of have the talent that y'all have. But if y'all could take one song, The World Only Knows It is a Tokyo Police Club song, y'all wrote it, did everything with it, what song are you
So wait, we could steal someone else's song and take credit for it? I was thinking about this lately. I don't know if this is what I would choose, though. I was going to say, I think the best song is Jolene. I think it's just, it's the best use of the pop, rock, country, verse, chorus, verse idiom to communicate what only a song can communicate. It's a perfect piece of creative work. But I can't take Jolene away.
Well,
That's a Dolly song, man. That can't be a Tokyo Police Club song.
Yeah.
Boy. That is no one's ever asked me that question before. Like I want to say a Hold Steady song. That doesn't feel very Tokyo Police Clubby, but I know that's also I'm getting a little bit too in the weeds about this question. Like I want to say Decepticon, but I feel like that song loses power if it's a bunch of dudes playing it. You know. This is Johnny Be Good from Back to the Future. God. Reptilia. Just a perfect use of exactly like what we're doing. The idiom that we're working in is probably the best possible version of it.
There you go. And one of the best parts about sort of Jolene, I mean, I guess I can't think of another song where it's two songs with the same title that are both very strong. You, of course, have Ray LaMontagne's Jolene that's been covered over and over again, and then Dolly's Jolene.
I'm in the OG Jolene.
Yeah.
It's just like it wouldn't be better as a book or a movie or a short story or a painting or a poem. It has to be a song. The melody informs the lyrics, and the lyrics inform the melody, and the emotion comes out of both of them. It's just a fucking miracle that Jolene exists.
It is, that's for sure. And we started this interview sort of talking about some of the pitfalls of music journalists. We'll circle back and we'll end it there as well. You do a ton of these interviews, which I give you a lot of credit for. What do you wish people asked you about more often when you have the chance to sit down and chat with them?
I mean, I was happy that you asked about not the literal writing process, but the process of our relationship to the songs as it goes, because that's really, especially, you know, I'm not the singer of the band. I don't write the songs from the jump. So my relationship to what we do is exactly what we just talked about, you know, is the experience of just like, of engaging with the song from different angles all the time. And I find that really endlessly fascinating, obviously. But not a lot of people think to ask about it. People are very excited to be like, what inspires you to write a song? Well, no. I was happy we got to talk about the Hold Steady. I think that's generally speaking, it's always fun to talk about music that I love. And I think that a lot of people forget that musicians are like some of the most enthusiastic music fans there are, and are real nerdy and happy to talk about it, and you can get someone going on it really easily. But again, people are, you know, often busy rewording the press releases questions.
It's funny that you mentioned that because Coffee and Flowers is a new podcast that essentially does just that. I think it's two musicians trying to figure out how the National arrived at Boxer, and they have these.
Oh, that's the new thing I heard. I saw about that. Yeah.
So maybe we can do that about Boys and Girls in America.
Oh my God. Well, there was a little Hold Steady podcast with them on it, and it actually kind of. I'm too much of a Hold Steady nerd to have enjoyed it. It was like a Slate podcast, so it was well produced and everything. But it was just like, it was very surface level. I was like, I need to go like 100 stories below the ground before I'm ready to talk about Boys and Girls in America in a way that will actually interest me. Because I've listened to it so many times.
Well, there you go. I can hear the drums in the background. It's almost time to wrap this up. This will be my last question for you. Who are you listening to right now?
Jay Mascis' solo records.
Oh, nice. There you go.
I mean, I love Dinosaur Jr. too, and they're not new to me, those solo records, but I just, like, over the last couple months, I was like, oh, man, this is what I want to listen to. And I just kind of just spin the three of them alternatingly all the time.
That sounds like a good way to be. And if you're not listening to TPC by Tokyo Police Club, damn it, you should be. Stop what you're doing. Do it right now.
Yeah.
Graham from That Band has joined me today. Graham, thank you so much for the time.
Hey, thank you. This was a blast. I really appreciate it.